Masechet Shevuot Daf Mem Aleph. Ma'ika ben Shevuah de'oraita l'Shevuah de'Rabbanan. What is the difference in procedure regarding a vow that is mandated by the Torah versus one that is mandated by the rabbis? We saw that, for example, Modeh b'Miksat, that's from the Torah, but Shevuat Heset is something that the rabbis impose. So what's the difference? Ika ben Ahu me'pach Shevuah B'doraita la mepechinan shevuah, b'drabanan mepechinan. One difference is whether you can flip the oath. Generally, it's mandated for the defendant, but if the defendant says, I don't want to swear, and instead he asks for the prosecution to make a vow, and he says, listen, if the claimant makes a vow, then I'll pay. If it's a deoraita vow, then we do not flip it, because, let's say that's modeh b'miksat, the Torah says that it's the defendant that he admitted to part of it, he has to vow if he doesn't want to pay. Of course, he can always pay the whole thing, but if he says, I don't want to make a vow, well, then he has to pay, because the Torah said he has to make a vow. He has no right to tell the claimant, no, you make a vow. However, if it's the Rabbanan, since it's rabbinically imposed, so there we're more flexible and he can impose it on the claimant. However, there is the opinion of Rav Asher. He thinks that even regarding a deoraita vow, the defense can say, I don't want to vow and not pay. I want the claimant to vow and then I will pay. And that's valid. So according to him, what is the difference between these two types of vows? The difference is whether we can enter his property to take what he owes. If it's a deoraita and the guy refuses to make a vow, then we say, oh, you don't want to make a vow? Or we're going to go in, and they send the sheriff in and they take from his property in order to pay. But if it's a drabanan and he refuses to make an oath, then we do not go into his property and make him pay. The Gemara will discuss this further. If you don't make him pay, then what's the good of it? If you're not going to do anything about it, then what does it fulfill? Ul-Rabbi said, now, there is another opinion of Rabbi Yosef, the Tana, who says that even for the Rabbanan law, we will enter the property and take what the person owes. Where do we see that Rabbi Yosef says that? It's not regarding vows, but regarding theft. Titnan, Mishnan Gitin, Mesiat Cheresh Otevekatan Yesh Bahem Gezel Mipnei Darkei Shalom. It says if someone finds an item and the person who finds it is a mute or not fully there or a minor, so they don't have enough knowledge, enough da'at to be able to acquire something. So they pick up this item that's on the floor. Technically, from a Doraita law, it's not theirs because they don't have enough of a mind to be able to take it. So anyone can just grab it from them legally. However, the rabbi said, listen, because of Darkei Shalom, even if it's a child and a child picks something up and someone goes and snatches it, they're going to start crying. The father's going to come. Who did this? Who took it? And or a mute person, right? So it's going to be all the same. The people are still going to be upset and will lead to fighting. And therefore, because of ways of peace, the rabbi said, don't pick it up. However, the Bioseh Omer, Gezel Gamur, this is outright stealing, taking it from that person. Amar Rav Chisda, Gezel Gamur b'divrehem. But Rav Chisda explained that when the Bioseh says it's outright stealing, he doesn't mean deoraita, because mideoraita, these people lack the competence to be able to make an acquisition. So it means it's midrabanan. Now, the mind of Kamina, what is the difference between Tanakama and Rav Chisda? What's the difference if you say it's Darkei Shalom or if you say it's midivrehem? According to the Bioseh, we can, if someone goes and snatches something from a child who finds an item, then we can go into his property and take it back. So you see that according to the Bioseh, even if someone violates stealing midrabanan, still the court can go and get it back from him forcibly. So that would be the same. The same would be true regarding a vow. If the rabbis say you have to make a vow or else, and he says no, I'm not making a vow, so he's violating the Rabbanan. So the rabbis can go in and take it, and then therefore, that's the same as the Doraita. Ma'ika ben Doraita l'Rabanan. According to the Bioseh, what's the difference between a rabbinic vow and a Torah vow? Ika benah shekenegdo chashud ala Shevuot. B'Doraita שכנגדו חשוד על שבועה בחינן לשבועה ושמוע יידך. בדרבנן תקנתה היא ותקנתה לתקנתה לאו דינן. Difference would be if the person who has to make the vow, the person on the opposite side of the claimant, meaning the defendant, if the defendant is not reliable to make a vow. He made false vows or false testimony before, and he's already known not to be trusted. He's on the do not trust list. So even though he's modeh b'miksat or something, and he has to make a vow, but he can't make a vow because even if he makes a vow, we're not going to trust it. So if it's a deoraita vow like modeh b'miksat, then we switch it to the claimant. Listen, claimant, I know you want to collect, but he can't. He's supposed to make a vow, but he can't. So in that case, yes, the mideoraita, we switch it to the offense. However, if it's drabanan, then we do not make a rabbinic ordinance upon another rabbinic ordinance. It's enough that the rabbi said, listen, for extra protection, we want this defendant to make a vow in this and that case. Okay, so that already made. Now, if he can't, now we're going to make another ordinance and flip it over to the claimant. That much they're not going to do. So that would be a difference between the Doraita and the Rabbanan, according to the Bioseh. Ul Rabbanan de Peligia le the Bioseh, Amru ben Rabbanan la nachtinan le nichse, may abdinan le, mishametinan le. Now, according to the rabbis who disagree with the Bioseh, who say that the difference between Doraita and the Rabbanan is that Doraita, the court will go and grab his property if he doesn't want to vow, but in Drabanan, we don't go into his property. So then, if they're not going to back up their takana and there's no consequences, then what's the point of making the takana? What did they do? And the answer is, we will do something. We're not going to grab his property, but if he doesn't come to court to confess, then we will excommunicate him until he comes and confesses. Good, that'll be a strong reason for him to come. Amar le Rabina l'Ravashe, hay nakte bechubse denishbeke ligilimehu. But Ravina es Ravashe, if you're going to excommunicate the person unless he comes and confesses, that's the same as grabbing a man by his privates and forcing him to surrender his cloak. Excommunicate someone, that's it. They can't talk to anybody, nobody can go near them, no one can invite them, no one's going to do business with them, they're going to starve. I mean, this is social ostracism, is very serious. And so that's like more strict than anything. That's like extortion. So what do you mean? You're not going to go and get his property. What you're doing by excommunicating him is even more. So we can't do that much just because he didn't make a vow midrabanan. So what can we do? Okay, we don't make a permanent excommunication. That would be too much. But we can excommunicate him temporarily until the time comes when he's going to get lashes. We call him to court. You have to come, and you have 30 days to come. So if he doesn't come within 30 days, then we give him lashes, and that's it. We leave him alone and undo the excommunication. We do something, but you can't go way overboard and excommunicate the guy forever just because he didn't take a drabanan vow. Amar Rav Papa, Haimanda apik shetara al chabre, v'amar le shetara parua hu, amrinan le lav kol keminach, zir shelim, v'im amar li ishtabat li, amrinan le ishtabat le. Rav Papa has a law. If a person produces a promissory note against someone else in court, so he has a note, so basically the defendant has to pay. But if the defense says, listen, this is a valid note, but I paid it already. So we tell them, well, we don't believe you. Go and pay. What do you mean? Do you have a receipt? No. Did you take this document and rip it up? You're supposed to take it or get a receipt. No. Are there witnesses? No. So you have to go and pay. So that's the basic law. However, if the defendant says, I want him to take an oath and then I'll pay, then we ask the claimant to take an oath. We do make him take an oath because he did claim that he paid. So why not? If it's true, so then he won't have a problem taking a vow that this promissory note was never paid. Amar le Rav Acha bered Rava le Rav Asher. Uma ben ze lepogemet shetaro. Rav Acha, the son of Rava, asked Rav Asher, what would be the difference between this case where there's nothing wrong with the shtar? A person brings a shtar that's 100%. And he says, you owe all of it, and defense says, I want you to swear, and we make him swear. What's the difference between that and someone who weakens his document? That's a case where, let's say, a woman has a ketubah. Ketubah says that the husband has to pay her $10,000. She presents the ketubah and says, listen, he has it says $10,000. He already paid me $2,000 beforehand while we were married. Sometime before, he paid me $2,000, and so it's only $8,000 left. By her admitting that it was partially paid, she is weakening the ketubah. We're somewhat weakening the claim. And in such a case, we require that the person holding the note has to make a vow. So here's the question. What's the difference between these two cases? Because over there we say only if a person lowered the status by admitting to part of it was paid, they have to make a vow. But now you're saying in any case, the defense can make the claimant take a vow. Amar le ha-tam afal gav de la ta'in ihu tanina le anan. Hacha amrinan le zil shelim le v'yitain v'amar ishtabat li amrinan le zil ishtabat le v'yisum rabbanan hu la meshabe'inan le. So Rav Ashi answered, the difference is that in the case of someone who lowered the status of their note because they admitted, then even if the defense does not ask the claimant to make a vow, we, the judges, make him take a vow. Oh, you're admitting that this note was partially paid? Okay, you better make a vow for the rest of it because you're already weakened your claim. However, in a case where the note is not weakened and they have to pay 100%, then we tell the defendant, go and pay. And only if the defendant himself says, oh, I would like to request a vow, then we say to the claimant, go and vow. So that's the difference between them, whether it's an automatic, whether the judges make the claim or they don't make the claim, but the defendant has to make the claim. However, if the claimant is a Talmid Chacham, then we do not make him take a claim. So the claimant is a Torah scholar. He produces a document, you owe me $1,000, and the other guy says, I want you to take a vow. So the judges are going to be embarrassed to tell this Torah scholar, listen, you're not trustworthy. You have to make a vow. It's not nice, not respectful. So we don't make him take a vow. Amar Rav Yemar Rav Ashi, Sum Rabbanan Meshalak Yelimad En Ashi. So Rav Yemar asked Rav Ashi, this doesn't make sense. A Torah scholar then can go and take people's cloaks. They can just go and they don't have the same rights as anyone else. If the defendant says he doesn't owe, so now the Torah scholar is going to take it, and we waive the right that the defendant has to force the claimant to make a vow, and then he'll just take things. That's not fair. Ela la mizdakekinan le'ledineh. No, what we mean, not that we say that the claimant can collect without a vow, but rather that the judges disqualify themselves, they recuse themselves, and we don't attend to the case. They say, listen, we're not going to tell you to make a vow because it's not respectful, but we're also not going to say that he has to pay, because we're just going to recuse ourselves, and then you leave it up into their hands if the claimant goes and he himself can go and grab the money that he is owed. So we'll look the other way, but basically we're not going to get involved in such a case. The Mishnah taught a case where a claimant comes in front of witnesses and says to the defendant, you owe me 100 dinar. And at that point, he's not collecting it, and the defendant says, indeed, I do. He admits to it, but it's not collected at that point. And then the claimant comes the next day and says, that 100 dinar that you admitted to, I'd like you to pay it now. And the defendant says, I already paid you. In that case, it's possible that he paid him overnight. And therefore, the defendant not only does not have to pay, but also is exempt from taking any oath. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Aseh. And now a halacha in the name of Rav Aseh. We're going to bring this clause in the Mishnah as a challenge to the following law of Rav Aseh. He teaches, Hamavet chavero be'adim, sarich leforo be'adim. If someone lends money to someone else in front of witnesses, then that's like an implicit condition that the payment has to be also in front of witnesses. It's the obligation, the responsibility of the borrower to find witnesses and have them present when he pays back. And if he doesn't, payment and he claims, oh, I paid you back already, then we say, well, not in front of witnesses, then we don't believe you. If the original loan was not in front of witnesses, then different story. Then he can pay back without witnesses. But if the original loan was with witnesses, that's the same as stipulating, you have to pay me back with witnesses, otherwise we're not going to believe you and you have to pay. כי אמריתי קמא דשמואל אמר לי, יכול לומר לו פירתיך בפני פלוני ופלוני, והלכו להם למדינת הים. Rav Yehuda, who reported the original law in front of from Rav Aseh, he said, when I repeated the law of Rav Aseh to Shemuel, Shemuel disagreed with it because he said that the borrower can claim, I did pay you in front of witnesses, Mr. A and Mr. B, but they traveled overseas, they're not here, so they're not here to testify, but I indeed did pay you in front of witnesses, and he would be believed in such a case, and therefore he is believed and he does not have to pay. Tenan mane li biadecha amar lo hen lemachar amar lo tenehu li netativ lecha patur v'hacha kevan de tab'e be'edim kevan de osfe be'edim dameh v'katane patur. And now a challenge against Rav Aseh's law from our Mishnah. If a claimant said, you owe me a maneh, and the defendant says, yes, indeed I do. This is in front of witnesses. And then he didn't pay at that time, but the next day, the claimant says, I want you to pay me, and the defendant says, I already paid you. Now here, because the original conversation was in front of witnesses, so isn't that the same as a case where he lends him in front of witnesses? And therefore, just like a case of where he lends him in front of witnesses, he has to pay back in front of witnesses, otherwise he's not believed, then he has to pay. So here too, that should be the same law, and yet the Mishnah taught that the defense does not have to pay patur. This is a challenge to Rav Aseh, who said in a similar case, we're assuming that if the loan was done in front of witnesses, that's the same as the admission in front of witnesses. And so Rav Aseh would say he's liable to pay in front of witnesses, whereas here it says, no, he could just say patur, and the claimant cannot demand and say, wait, you had to pay me in front of witnesses. Where's your witnesses? Tiyubtad Rav Aseh. So this is a rejection against Rav Aseh. However, after that, the Gemara brings a backup. Amar lach Rav Aseh, ana ki amari hecha demikara osfe be'edim. Rav says, actually, there's a difference between the two cases. I said my case when the original loan was given in front of witnesses. So then that's like making a condition at the time of the original loan. When you pay me back, you better do it in front of witnesses because I don't trust you. The fact that the lender got witnesses and when at the time of giving the loan and gave it in front of witnesses is because he doesn't trust the borrower. He's afraid the borrower is going to say, what loan? I don't know what you're talking about. I never got any money from you. No, I'm getting witnesses because I don't believe you. So the fact that he got witnesses all the way in the beginning means he doesn't believe him, and that's why we say when he pays back, that the borrower has to make sure it's his responsibility to get witnesses because he doesn't believe him. But here, the original loan was with witnesses. The original loan was not in front of witnesses. It's only later on when he comes and he wants to verify, don't you owe me? And he says, yes, that's in front of witnesses. But see, in this case, since the original loan was not given in front of witnesses, so that means the lender believed the borrower, and the borrower does not have an obligation to pay back in front of witnesses, and so therefore Rav Aseh's law is in fact consistent with the Mishnah. Rav Aseh's law is only when he originally gave the loan out in front of witnesses. The Mishnah was talking about when he gave the loan out and not in front of witnesses. Only later on he asked for an admission in front of witnesses. Rav Yosef matneh hachina. Rav Yosef has a different version of this whole conversation and of the law of Rav Aseh. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Aseh, hamavet chavero be'edim eno sarich lefaro be'edim, v'im amar al tifra'ani ela be'edim sarich lefaro be'edim. This is the opposite. According to this version, Rav Yehuda, name of Rav Aseh, said, someone who lends money to his friend with witnesses does not have to, if someone lends money to his friend without witnesses, that friend does not have to pay back in front of witnesses, unless the lender said specifically, do not pay me back only in front of witnesses. Otherwise, we won't be believed. Ki amrita kamed Shmuel amar li yachol omar lo peraticha bifnei piloni ufloni v'alchu lahem lemedinat hayam. Whenever Yehuda repeated this in front of Shmuel, Shmuel said, I disagree with even the second part where he made a condition, because even if you made a condition and said you have to pay me back in front of witnesses, still the borrower can say, I did pay you back in front of Mr. A and Mr. B, and they went away on a trip. And so therefore, since he could say that, he would be believed if he says, I paid you. And therefore, this is not enforceable according to Shemuel. Tenan, maneli biyadecha amar lo hen, amar lo al titenehu li, ela bifnei adim, lemachad amar lo tenehu li, netativ lecha chayav, mipnei shesarich liten lo be'adim, tiyubta di Shmuel. We have a challenge now against Shemuel from the Mishnah that teaches, if someone, the claimant says, you owe me $100, right? In front of witnesses, and the defense says, yes, indeed, I do. And then the claimant says, listen, I want you to pay me only in front of witnesses. This is the next clause in the Mishnah, the one after the one that we quoted in the first version. And so the claimant says, okay, you just admitted, when I want you to pay me back only in front of witnesses. And the next day, he comes and says, pay me back. And the defense says, I already paid you. We don't believe him. He has to pay again, because it was his responsibility to find witnesses to pay in front of, because he had to give it in front of witnesses. And this is a challenge to Shemuel, because Shemuel said, even if you make a stipulation that that you have to pay back with witnesses, still he would be believed even without bringing witnesses, because he could claim that I gave it in front of witnesses and they went away. So he's believed even if he just says, I paid you. So this clause is a challenge against Shemuel. But Shemuel has an answer. Amal Shemuel Tanai Hidetanya, Be'adim Ilviticha, Be'adim Peratli, O Yiten O Yabi Re'aya Shenatan. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betara Omed, Yachol Omar Lo, Peraticha Bifnei Peloni Ufloni, V'alchu Lehem Limidat Hayam. Shemuel can explain, indeed, that this Mishnah is not consistent with my opinion. It's true, but there's a machloket Tanaim, and I can follow the other opinion. And how do you know that there are two Tanaitic opinions from this Baraita, where someone says, I lent you money with witnesses, and I want you to pay me back with witnesses. He says so explicitly. So then the borrower has to either pay, or he has to bring proof that he paid. It's up to him, it's his responsibility to bring proof. He can't just claim that I paid you. That's Tanakama, same as our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betara, however, says he can say, I paid you in front of this person and that person, and they went away. And that's the same as Shemuel's opinion, and therefore Shemuel says, I don't have to agree with our Mishnah. I can follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betara. Parich Rav Acha, mimai de b'shat halva'a ka'eh, dilma b'shat tebi'a ka'eh, v'achi ka'amar le, lav be'adim el v'iticha, be'adim haya lecha lefor'eni, ava b'shat halva'a dibra kol chayav. Rav Acha refutes Shemuel's answer and says, this source here is not a proof for you that you can follow Rabbi Yehuda ben Betara, because how do you know that this case is talking about where the lender made a stipulation at the time of the loan? Maybe he made the stipulation at the time that he's coming to collect. And he's telling him as follows, didn't I lend you with witnesses? So I'm telling you now, I didn't tell it to you back then, but I'm telling you now, I'd like you to pay in front of witnesses. And that's where there's a machloket where Tanakama says, that he has to fulfill that stipulation, and the borrower has to either pay money or bring proof. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Betara says, no, he could say, I paid in front of this person and that person, and they went away. But that's because the stipulation says, Be'adim il viticha, be'adim peratli. He's saying at the time that he's coming to collect, I want you to pay me in front of witnesses. That's where you have two opinions. But if he stipulated at the time of the loan and said, I want you to make sure to pay me only in front of witnesses, then it could very well be that everyone, even Rabbi Yehuda ben Betara, would say he cannot get out of it by saying, there were witnesses and they went away. He would have to pay him in front of witnesses and would not be believed to say that there were witnesses, but they went away. And therefore, Shemuel cannot say, it's a machloket Tanaim, I'm relying on Rabbi Ben Betara. Rabbi Yomi ben Betara was not necessarily talking about a case where it was lent at the time of the lending. There was a condition that has to be with witnesses, and so he may very well not agree with Shemuel, and therefore that is a challenge to Shemuel. Amar Rav Papi mishmeh de Rava. Hilchatam aved chavero be'adim sarich lefor'o be'adim. Rav Papi says, name of Rava, that the halacha is that someone who lends money to someone else with witnesses, that the assumption is that he wants to be paid also in front of witnesses. He didn't trust him in the first place to give him the money without witnesses, and so he has to pay with the witnesses. That's the first version of the law that we saw above of Rav Asi. Rav Papa, Mishimeh de Rava Amar. Now, Rav Papa, this is very similar. They're both saying in the name of Rava, but Rava had two students. One was Rav Papi, one was Rav Papa. Two different people with very similar names. Okay, and anyway, he had a different tradition of what Rava said, and according to him, he said the opposite. Someone who lends with witnesses does not have to pay back with witnesses. We don't assume that unless you make an explicit condition, which is the next part. If the lender said at the time of the loan, you better pay me back only in front of witnesses, otherwise I'm not going to accept your word for it, then the lender, the borrower, has to make sure to get witnesses. And in such a case, if the borrower says, oh, I already paid you back in front of this person and that person, but they went away, then he is believed. Now notice this word here, is believed. That's what we have in our Gemara. If you look at the Rambam has something very, very interesting to say regarding this halacha. He says, "Yesh nuschot min haGemara shekatuv behen she'amar lechavero tifreni ela be'adim, v'amar lo peraticha b'fnei ploni u'floni v'alchul matayam eno ne'eman." Rambam notes that there are some versions of the Gemara, not ours. The one that we have, that I just read, is the same one that Rambam has. But Rambam says there are others who have a different version that says in that same case, so the lender said, only pay me back in front of witnesses. And the borrower said, I did pay back in front of witnesses, but they went away. And it says he's not believed. That version, ta'ut sefarim hu, lefir tomorim al pi otana sefarim. That's a mistake. And there were many people that had that version, but they follow that version, but it's a mistake in halacha. And Rambam knows this because uchvad chakati anuschot hayeshanot umaseti behen shehu ne'eman v'higia liyadi b'Mitzrayim miksat gemara yeshana katuv al hagevelim kemo shehu kotvim kodem lazman hazeh bekarov 500 shana. And I know it's because I checked all the versions of the manuscripts. Rambam, amazingly, he would go and check it out and get the best manuscripts he could. And he says, I found a solid witness because I got here in Egypt a partial Gemara that's very old, that's written on this thick parchment, as they used to write 500 years ago. And the Rambam's writing this before 1200. So 500 years before that is 700 CE. This is by far the earliest testament, the earliest quote from a written Gemara. It was, until that time, it was mostly oral. Maybe some private notes were written, but mostly it was oral. And even in the Yeshivot of the Geonim, primarily it was learned orally. And here, Rambam is quoting a manuscript of the Gemara from the year 700, which we don't have anymore. We don't even have anything like that. And yet, Rambam is quoting it. And it says, I found two of them, in fact, not just one, and I found from the Gevilim Halacha Shnehem Katuv Im Amar Perati Bifne Ploni Ufloni Ne'eman. In these two ancient versions, it says the word Ne'eman. And because of this mistake that crept into some of the manuscripts, some of the Geonim made a halachic ruling that is the opposite, and Rambam says very strongly that that's wrong. So you see how the whole halacha, whether you have to pay or not pay, depends on just one word here, difference in the manuscripts, and Rambam was so careful to make sure he got the best manuscript. Siman, Reuven v'Shimon detanu hilcheta yasfiu fara peloni ufloni afse sitrae behemnuta kebe tere. So mnemonic to remember the following list of various cases involving loans and witnesses. Hahuda amar lechavre ki peratin Pera'in li be'aped Reuven v'Shimon. Someone lends money, says, listen, when you pay me back, I want you to pay me back in front of these two people, Reuven and Shimon. I think what he's trying to do, he doesn't want a situation where the borrower says, I paid you back in front of two witnesses, but they went away. Listen, I don't want anybody who goes away. I don't trust anyone. I trust Reuven and Shimon. I know they're going to be here. I want you to pay me back in front of those two people, or else I'm not accepting the payment. I won't believe you, and you have to pay me again. The borrower goes ahead and he pays back in front of two other people, other kosher witnesses, but not Reuven and Shimon. Abaye says, well, he's believed, it's valid. The lender asked him to pay in front of two people, and he paid in front of two people, although it's not Reuven and Shimon, but he paid in front of two witnesses. So even though he didn't fill the condition technically, but he did pay in front of two witnesses, and two witnesses are believed. And so that's it. We accept it. And he doesn't have to pay again. But Rava disagreed with Abaye's ruling on this, and he said, this is the very reason why the lender said, I want you to pay in front of Reuven and Shimon, so that he won't be able to dismiss him saying, oh, I repaid in front of some other people, I don't know where they are, go find them. He got to give a specific condition, so Rava says you have to fulfill that specific condition, and it's not good enough that he paid in front of other people, even if they were valid witnesses. Second case, someone lends money and says, when you pay me back, I want you to pay me back in front of people that are learned in halacha. Not just anybody, they're not going to remember, they're not going to know the details. I want someone learned that I can trust. Hazal pera'aya ben dile le dile itnisu hanach zuzeh. So they paid back just in front of between themselves, without any witnesses at all, just from the lender and the borrower there. He paid back, and then the lender accepted the money, but then lost it beyond his control. Say it was stolen. Something happened beyond his control, and he didn't have the money anymore. So he originally accepted it, even though it was in front of witnesses, because, okay, he's giving me the money, he was going to take the money. But now that he lost it, he wants to go back and bring him to court and say, you didn't fulfill the condition. So they came before Rav Nachman, who was known as a great expert as a judge in monetary matters. Kabule kibaltin humine derech pikadon ve'amina leheve gabay pikadon ad demitremu be tere detanu hilcheta umikayem tenaehem. So Nachman says, what's going on? Did you get the money? And the lender says, I did receive the money, yes, but I accepted it not as repayment for the loan. I accepted it as a deposit to hold on to. And I said to myself, I will keep this as a deposit until two people who are learned in halacha will arrive, and they will witness that I have this money, and then the condition will be fulfilled. But in the meantime, until I meet two people that can be witnesses, I'm holding on to it as a deposit. And the law is that if someone is holding on to something for a deposit, it's shomer chinam, and it gets lost or stolen beyond his control, then he's not liable. So therefore, I was holding on to this guy's money as a deposit. It got lost, I'm not liable. He still owes me to pay back for the loan in front of two witnesses who know halacha, and therefore he still has to pay me. Okay, that sounds like a good claim. Amale, kevan de kamodit devadai shekaltinu mine peraon me'aliyah haveh. Rav Nachman says, you admitted that you got money from him, and therefore that is a proper repayment. I'm considering that a repayment. You didn't say, oh, I'm only accepting this as a pikadon. You didn't specify that. You had in mind you were going to take this as a payment, and now you're coming back and making up the story. No, I was only a pikadon. Now I lost this. Now I'm not responsible for that. You have to pay me again. No, I don't accept that. And you yourself admitted, so your admission is greater than any witnesses. I amad lekayumet zil aitinhu deha ana v'rav sheshat tetanena hilchata v'sifra v'sifre v'tosefta v'chula tamuda. And Rav Nachman continues in a sarcastic manner, and he says, and if you say, oh, I want to fulfill my condition, and I want it to be paid in front of two witnesses, so you know what I'll tell you? Go bring the money. I know it's lost, but okay, right? Imagine it's not lost. Go bring the money, or bring your admission, and bring it here, because after all, Rav Sheshat and I, we are learned in halacha. Not only do we learn halacha, we learn the sifra, that's midrash halacha and vayikra, sifre, that's midrash halacha and B'midban Devarim, Tosefta, all the other Tannaitic traditions besides the Mishnah, and the entire Talmud. They're in the Talmud. So Talmud here is talking about all the Talmud until then, all the questions and answers and reasoning, one thing from another. So we're very learned. So we are here and we will testify. Right, where's that money? Oh, you lost it. That's your problem. But you admitted that you had it. So if you want to fulfill the condition, well, if you had the money, you could just show it to us, and that would fulfill the condition. But since you admitted that you got paid back, and now you're making up a whole story about Pikadon, we don't accept your story, and that's it. You lost your case. Someone comes and says, I want you to give me the 100 zuz that I lent you. And the defender says, you never gave me any money. I don't know what you're talking about. I never got any money from you. Now the lender goes and gets witnesses that he did in fact lend money to the borrower and that the borrower paid back. So these witnesses are half for him, but also are ruining his case. What do we do in such a case? Abaye says, what should be the verdict? Well, these witnesses, they said that there was a loan, but they also said that the borrower paid back. So we'll follow the witnesses, and therefore we can assume that there was a loan and it was paid back, and the borrower does not have to pay. That's how Abaye ruled. Rava says, no. Anyone who says, I never received a loan, it's the same as saying, I never paid it back. If he's saying, I never got a loan, then he's admitting that he never paid back. And therefore, we're going to accept half of the testimony of the witnesses, the half that said that we saw that he did get a loan. So we can prove that, in fact, there was a loan here, and the lender, that gives credence to the lender. Now, did he pay back or not? Well, witnesses said that they saw him pay back. But the guy himself admitted that there never was a loan, which means that he's admitting that he never paid back. So therefore, we're going to believe him that he never paid back. And so Rava said the borrower has to pay. We don't believe you to say that there was no loan, because you said that because there are witnesses that said there was a loan. But we will accept your statement that you didn't pay back. He didn't say it. He said there was never a loan, but that includes not paying back, and therefore Rava said you do have to pay. And last case for today, someone comes and says, give me the 100 dinar that I claim from you, and the defense says, didn't I repay you in front of Mr. A and Mr. B? So they brought those two witnesses, and the witnesses, we don't know what you're talking about, we never saw you pay back. The witnesses did not back up the defense. Rav Sheshat says we should make a chazakah, make a declaration that this the debtor, the defendant, is a liar, and not believe him anymore to be able to swear, because look, he said that he paid back, and now there's witness, and he quoted witnesses, and the witnesses didn't back him up. So should we say from now on that he's a liar, and we won't accept any vow from him? Rava says no. Anything that a person doesn't have to remember, he may not remember. And since in this case the lender didn't say you have to pay me back in front of witnesses, so the borrower was not careful necessarily to pay him back in front of witnesses. So he didn't have it in mind. So he forgot. He thought he paid back in front of witnesses, and he thought those two people were there. But it wasn't a significant thing to have to remember, because he didn't have to pay back in front of witnesses. So he made a mistake. It's true he made a mistake, but that doesn't make him a liar. And therefore, we should not consider him a liar going forward. He will have to pay or swear. In this case, he can get out of paying by swearing, because the creditor did not have witnesses either. But although he'll have to make a swear or pay, we're not going to assume that he is a liar going forward. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.